So I noticed over the last couple of months that my diesel heater was smoking a little bit more, and it was also taking sometimes 2 or 3 attempts to fire up. So as I live in my van full time and I was travelling through Scotland, I replaced it because I carry a spare, but ultimately I wanted to get to the bottom of why this had happened and understand a little bit more about it to hopefully prevent it happening in the future. So in this video we're going to strip down this diesel heater, work out what's wrong with it, and then once we've fully serviced it using all new parts, we're going to put it back into the van and yeah, see what happens after that. So I know I've put a new diesel heater in, but I'm a bit fussy. I've got a problem with it, and that is it's not as good as the last one, in all fairness. So when the last one was working fine, it was brilliant. It was very quiet and very efficient, so it got hot nice and fast, and at night you could leave it on overnight. You couldn't hear it, but it kept the van like about sort of like 10-12 degrees, whereas this one, it takes about 2 hours just to sort of get it up to temperature in the van. But the minimum fan speed on it is really noisy, so I've not been sleeping with the heater on overnight. I've been waking up in the morning, it's a bit chilly. So I got my workbench out with the old diesel heater and some tools, service kit, new glow plugs, little sort of like brushes to help clean everything out inside. I'll link everything in the video description down below, but ultimately I just want to get everything sort of serviced so it looks and operates as it did when it was new. So let's get cracking. So get some tools now and then start to get this thing stripped out. So as part of the service kit, which is this box I'm unwrapping at the moment, you get the gaskets for the 2 different chamber connections. You get 2 little tools, which one is to poke, so the black tool there is to poke the atomizer back in its hole, and then the obviously the glow plug that you get as well, and then the other tool is to remove the glow plug, and you also get a new atomizer as well. So using the glow plug tool, it only requires a tiny little bit of tightening and loosening, obviously conversely, to sort of loosen it up, and then it's just a matter of just twisting it around until it pops out. My intention is to use all the parts that I take out and put them back in again if they're serviceable. So the best thing I'm going to be able to do now is look in there and see if that hole is free, and then we can get these little picks in. So almost at the top of the glow plug hole, once you've removed it, there's a tiny little air hole which starts off the entire process of it firing up. So I'm going to use one of these little picks now just to sort of feel that the air hole is still free. So the pick isn't small enough to go down there and pick out that. So that is what's actually put down in that little hole. Bump like that. So I need something that I can get inside and pick at it. And as you can see, that's just too fat. So I have to craft something that does the job. So as part of the pick set, there were right angles, curl picks, and all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So I found one that was almost the right size, and then just kind of compressed the end a little bit, bent it back a little bit, so it allowed me to get inside the atomizer, and then to obviously grasp at it and then pull it out. Apart from me just sort of destroying a little bit of it there, that was also all right. Obviously this one is the one I've just pulled out, and what I did, I just bent over the pick a little bit more, which allowed me to drop it inside at the angle. So it's dirty, but I wouldn't say it's the problem, just like I wouldn't say that that plug is the problem either. So if it isn't the atomizer, it wasn't the hole in there either, because the hole was clear. So just to demonstrate that one again, you can see there where the hook's going through. So there's no dirt on the end of that hook, which means that that hole would have been free. So this is basically what I was trying to do, was just pull it apart to determine if there's you know, an easy identifiable fix to it. That's not the issue. The gauze isn't the issue. So it's got to be something either to do with the pump, but the pump is working right now with the replacement heater. The exhaust is also working right now with the replacement heater. So I think ultimately we're just going to have to pull this one apart and just see what it's like inside, see how clogged up it is. So the next stage is to remove the circuit board from the top of the heater, which entails, obviously we've already removed the diesel heater connector, so you remove the temp sensor connector and the motor connector, and then it was just a case of trying to see if you could see anything on the back of the PCB, like a dry joint or, you know, something that a foreign object that had shorted something out, anything I could possibly see on there, just so I knew that maybe that was at fault, or I knew also whether it was a serviceable item to put back in again when I reassembled it. But before we take the diesel heater itself apart, I thought I'd just show you the exhaust side of things. So the exhaust port is obviously the one that's been smoking away. How dare it, should be given up by now. But it's not as clogged up as I thought, although it looks very, very wet inside there. So let's open it up and see what it looks like inside. That is a really tight fit. So we need some Allen keys to break these chambers apart and look inside. Obviously the other importance of recording this is I know exactly which screw went where and how it all goes back together. Okay, does this just come apart now? Yes it does. I'm glad I bought the new gasket. That's interesting, that's so clean. So I've seen people do this a lot. And I've seen these chambers, apparently that's not to worry about as well. They break off these little bits around it to balance the fan. But I've seen people take these apart and that's been black. Whereas as you can see, it's barely got a coating on it. Fan still works, still spins okay. And obviously I'll get the rest of this gasket off before I fit the new one. And again in there, that looks okay as well. So this is a bit strange, folks. So just to reiterate, the problem with this was it would smoke a lot and then wouldn't fire up. There we go. Take a first look inside there. I mean, yeah, it's burnt. First look inside there, that is sopping wet through with diesel. I mean, you can see how much diesel is collecting down the bottom there. So inside that bottom bit there is another one of these atomizer setups. So normally if it's caked in everything down there, the atomizer would be dirty as well, but there's hardly anything there. It's just that it's soaked in diesel. And then if we look in there, again, normally you would find this coked up, but now it's just, you can see the diesel there. It basically is just saturated in diesel, which is weird because it was working, it just wouldn't work on fire up. There we go, folks. Not what I expected to find. As we've seen, this is all sopping wet through. You know, there's no carbon in there. There's no carbon build-up or anything causing any of this. It's just diesel. So I'm going to use some brake cleaner and clean this up as best as I can. And that's where these little brushes come into it as well. That give all these little things a bit of a clean out. Obviously with these I can go right into the bottom of there where it goes into the burn chamber. Again, you can see by that how little dirt is coming out of there, how clean it really is. This is what you'd normally expect. All this carbon here, you'd expect this everywhere. I can show you now that little hole I was talking about, so that's not plugged up there. So it's clean down the barrel, it's just that bottom end bit. So I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit more. Hopefully that we'll sort that bit of a problem out. I was asked a question as well while I'm trying to do this cleanup. Why I don't buy, if I buy all this other stuff for my van that's expensive, which I don't, I buy value for money stuff, but hey ho, some people see it a different way. But if I spend loads of money on like wheels and tyres, why I don't spend loads of money on a diesel heater and get something like a Webasto or an Erbspacher or the Russian one. And the honest answer is, if you go online and look at people doing this with any one of those products, you'll find they're identical. I even found one of the Russian one that was all stripped down, where it didn't even have a case over like the electronics bit, so there wasn't even a cover over that bit. It was just exposed sort of PCB, but ultimately inside they all look like this. They all do the same thing, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, Chinese, it's all copies and everything like that. Well, a lot of those parts are manufactured from copies of someone else doing it. Every car we drive is a copy of original that someone made, and if someone sees something good and copies it and makes it cheaper, then why not give it a go? The thing is, I've had one of these heaters run in my motorhome for probably about a year and a half without any issue whatsoever when I owned it, and it's still in there now, and the new owner hasn't told me it's not working. If you're watching, Lee, leave a comment down below and let people know if the heater's still working in the motorhome. So yeah, it's relevant to just having a bad one, I guess. And at the end of the day, as you can see from this, everything seems to be working, or everything looks on the surface of it like it should be working. So it could well be something completely different. Right, waffling now. Well, that's clean. So what we need to do now is clean all that up and get the diesel out of there. So at least that's coming out a bit dirty than it did in the top chamber. Yeah, so the last thing to do is just clean up our exhaust port as well. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave this in the sun now, because what I don't want to do is have brake fluid that's still in its liquid format in there when it fires up, because that will go pop bang. So as the brake fluid is evaporating from the burn chamber in the sun, I'm just going to clean the gasket off the fan assembly and give that a bit of a clean up, and obviously we can start reassembling things then and get it back in. So with all the old gaskets removed and all the surfaces cleaned up, it's just reassembly. And yeah, put the burn chamber back in. So once that goes in, just make sure then the holes align correctly, and then it's just a case of yeah, screwing it all down there, and then right at the end just kind of like nip them up to make sure they're nice and tight, and then it's just like I say, a reassembly of the main chamber to the fan assembly. Make sure again that all those things are nice and clean. Make sure the fan spins when you put it in place. Make sure everything aligns up, and then same again, just screw everything down gently, and then nip them off right at the end, just to make sure everything's nice and tight and secure. Continuing the reassembly, I decided to go for the new atomizer. Simply because the other one had been slightly kind of nicked as I pulled it out. I just didn't want to have any issues. So as you can see there, that's as far as you can sort of like normally push it in. And then remember, we have this little black tool, so just pop that in there and then push that all the way down. You're just making sure it sits below the airline hole that we cleaned out before. Then we're just going to put the glow plug back in. Again, I used the original glow plug, just a bit of a nip up at the end, not too tight. Put the rubber grommet around the edge, put the case over it, put the PCB assembly and all the wires and everything back in, making sure the cables are all sort of out of the way neatly. Put the rubber gasket back on the bottom, so that when it sits on the floor plate that it's nice and sealed in there. It's sort of like just spin the fan, make sure the case is in place, make sure I've not trapped any cables, and then we get it ready for installing in the van. I've got a full video about when I originally installed my diesel heater, which is underneath the driver's seat, which actually is right over the top of the exhaust. So you don't get to see an awful lot, unfortunately, about that installation. But obviously, if you go watch the original video, you can see how I did it. But ultimately, what I'm showing here is reassembly and sort of putting all the pipes and everything back in place. Now, I did put a new fuel pump on, and I also put a new fuel filter on, and you can see me here. I am using quite dense memory foam, and I wrap the pump and all the pipe, the fuel pipe and everything in dense memory foam. I use tie wraps, and then I suspend that at 45-degree angle in front of the front jacking point that you can see there. So it's all out of the way, and that means that I get very minimal vibration or pump noise traveling through the van, so it's almost sort of silent inside. From the outside you can still hear the pump ticking, but you know, I'm not too fussed about that, in all fairness. Again, this is a 2 kilowatt heater, so it's a 22 milliliter dosage pump that I'm installing. Like I say, I bought this pump on Amazon with the service kit and everything else, just to sort of like you know, go through issues. I think I'd worked out at this point the date that my diesel heater started going wrong was the date that my van started coming up with DPF, AdBlue errors, and the time that I'd started to put additives in the fuel to try and clean out the DPF and the you know, the AdBlue nozzle and all that kind of stuff. But because my diesel heater is plumbed into my diesel tank, my van's tank, it does mean that any additives that I put in my tank for my engine will also be used up via my diesel heater as well. So the fact that everything in my diesel heater looked like it was perfectly serviceable, but its issue was that it seemed to be having a problem firing up and, you know, sort of smoking and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't carboned up inside, like it wasn't burning correctly, then my assumption is that the additives that I've been putting into my tank over the last couple of months have prevented the initial combustion, or the correct initial combustion, of my diesel heater. Again, all supposition, but you know, you should run through things and work out what's going on. I think at the end of the day, those were, you know, the things that I could actually put my finger on and say these timings are too sort of similar to be ignored. So the proof of the pudding is going to be in a couple of minutes, and we'll see if it does fire up, and if it does, if it smokes an awful lot, I'll put a camera near it so you can hear the ticking noise inside and outside afterwards, so you can see that the memory foam solution does work really well. Success! Yeah, obviously it's fired up. I did worry slightly as soon as it started to smoke again, but it seemed to be just obviously what was left in the chamber of me disturbing everything. So yeah, that fired up as you saw, first time. A little bit of smoke, but other than that, that's it. But I'm going to let it ramp up to temperature so I can set it to a thermostatically controlled amount inside, which I like about 16 to 18 degrees, and then it gets to that, and then it sort of ramps itself back down again. So I'm going to let it get to normal temperature inside, and then I'm going to put the camera inside so that you can then listen to what it sounds like, see if you can hear the diesel heater ticking away. Right, so I can report it's been a few days later and everything is all right. Everything is still operating fine, and I'm happy to get my little functionalities back from this heater, which is the mountain/alpine mode, which reduces the pump rate by half, which is great for overnight because it uses less fuel and can keep the van still on the H1 lowest fan speed. Keeps the internal van temperature in these wintry cold conditions anyway to around about 12 degrees, so it's perfectly okay. Like I say, it's very quiet. I don't hear the pump inside, as you could hear from that little test, and you can just about hear it outside, so that's pretty good too. But yeah, I'm going to write this one down, as you could see from everything that I pulled apart. I'm going to write this one down to the 50 quid's worth of fuel additives that I'd used to fix the DPF AdBlue system, which didn't fix the DPF AdBlue system, and it also messed up my diesel heater. And the only reason I'm going to kind of like categorically say that that was it is because now the diesel heater's back in working fine and there are no additives in my fuel system. I made sure before I did all this work that I'd run the fuel tank down as low as possible and then filled it back up again without the additives, because also my van was all right once I'd cleared the AdBlue injectors and everything. That's been all right since. So there we go. So yeah, don't run your diesel heaters on anything other than fuel grade diesel. They do love premium diesel. I remember that from our time in Turkey, when they do love to serve you at the pump premium diesel, but it's so cheap over there you don't care. And the diesel heater worked absolutely brilliant over there, down to -20 temperatures and everything like that. So yeah, premium diesel or regular diesel works fine, but everything else seems to cause these things all sorts of problems. And from what I've seen online as well, where people are stripping them down and they're clogged up inside, it's usually because they've used cheaper diesel, or sometimes kerosene, or red diesel, or something like you know, used cooking oil or something like that. So regular diesel, folks, and they work fine. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about diesel heaters and what's going on and all that kind of stuff. So if you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, and I shall catch you on the next video. Take care, folks. Bye.